Whenever I see a scary thread, it ends up being about ghosts and whatnot. That's not scary. I find real people more strange and eerie than the paranormal. What are your scariest encounters with real people? One night, around 3 AM, I was dead asleep with my ex-boyfriend next to me. All of a sudden I hear someone in my house asking if anyone was home. I woke up my ex and told him to go see what the heck was going on. He was a total chicken crap and made me go. I get out of bed, can't find my glasses, but the guy is still shouting. I come out of my bedroom in my pajamas and see there is a big bald dude in what looks to be a police uniform standing in my entryway. I'm squinting trying to get a good look at him and he looks at me and says, "I just wanted to tell you that your door was left unlocked and you should lock it." I mumble something to the effect of "thanks," and he leaves my apartment. I'm still as blind as a bat, but I see that he walks away instead of getting into a car. No policeman would be policing the woodsy area I live in on foot. The next day I called the local police station and asked if any officers had reported this incident, and they said they would check with the on-duty officers and get back to me. They called me the next day and said no one had done this. I still get freaked out when I think about this happening, and I wish I knew what that guy was up to. When I was 18 I worked the evening shift at a convenience store. Over the previous 3 nights 3 stores from the same chain had been held up at gunpoint in my small city, so my manager had basically been prepping me all week to get robbed. I was, understandably, on edge all night. I was down to the last few hours of my shift and I was finally starting to calm down a little bit when a guy with his hat pulled down low walked in, came right up to the counter, and started reaching into the inside of his jacket and said, "You know those days when you should have just stayed home? I think this is one of them." Time was moving in slow motion at this point and my heart was beating out of my chest. After what felt like 10 minutes the guy pulled his wallet out of his jacket and asked for a pack of cigarettes. Anticlimactic, but scary nonetheless. My brother came into town on business and invited me to bar hop on his expense account. I let my wife know not to wait up and met up with him once I got off work. We spent the night going from bar to bar catching up on what had been going on in our lives until the last bar closed, around 2-3 AM. Then we stumbled back to his hotel room and passed out. I woke up the next morning around 7 AM and went home. My wife had already left so I didn't see her. An hour or so later she called me and asked where I had gone so early that morning. I was confused cause I didn't get home until after she had left for work. I explained this to her and she got really scared. She explained that around 12:31 AM she heard a key in the front door and the door opening. She sat up in bed and saw a male figure come in, who she assumed was me, and go into the living room. She assumed that I had just decided to sleep on the couch rather than come into the room and risk waking her up. So she just rolled over and went to sleep. A few hours later, around 5-6 AM, she heard someone moving around downstairs again and then the front door opened and she watched the person leave and heard the door lock. She thought I was heading out and just rolled back over to sleep again. We lived in a neighborhood of townhomes where every house looked the same, so we guess someone just got the wrong house and had a key that was close enough to ours to work. Then woke up and realized they were in the wrong house and got the heck out. We called a locksmith and had the locks changed that day. This story is 100% true. I experienced it myself in the summer of 1991. When I was about 10 years old, I lived on Woodway Drive in the Fox Harbor Apartments in Paducah, KY. If you look up the address, you will see some woods just to the north of the apartment complex. My friends and I played in those woods every day after school and all day on the weekends. Through the few years I lived there, we cleared a small area in the woods and created a fort from various things we got out of dumpsters. It was our own place that no one else knew about, and it was awesome. One day as we were walking to our fort, off in the distance we saw a man walking through the woods. He was walking parallel to us, but in the opposite direction, like cars traveling on a road, but with about 70-80 yards separating our paths. We stopped talking and stopped dead in our tracks when we saw him. We never saw anyone in the woods, especially not adults. When we stopped moving, he did too. He turned towards us and looked right at us. As I stared at him and was able to make out the details of what he looked like, I noticed that he was wearing what looked like a Halloween mask, a generic mask, not Michael Myers, and carrying an axe in his hands. We stood there in silence and motionless for what was probably about 10 seconds. He looking at us, and us looking at him. He started sprinting straight at us. We did the only thing we apparently thought to do, run straight to our fort. We were probably about 50 yards from the entrance to the fort, and in those 50 yards he gained a lot of ground on us. When we finally made it, he was upon us. All of my friends scurried up a tree and were screaming, but I was the last in line. By the time I could try and climb the tree, he was standing right there by us. He was screaming like a lunatic and waving the axe in the air. I was scared, had no idea what was going on, and my mind was blank on what I should do. I grabbed a large stick and took a nice big baseball bat swing and cracked him on the face with it. He stumbled back a bit, moaned and took the mask off. I recognized the face. It was the landlord and manager of the apartment complex, a man who was probably about 50 years old. He wanted to play a joke on us and thought this was the most appropriate thing to do. He was a freaking psycho. And he wouldn't have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. When I was quite young, I was out at the park walking my dog, German Shepherd, when I realized it was getting quite late and I was the only one left in the park. A man dressed in a dark hooded top and a black scarf covering his face jumped the fence that leads into the alleyway behind the park and started marching towards me, but he hadn't spotted my dog, who was off sniffing around or doing whatever dogs do. My dog got between us though, and there was a kind of standoff for a while. My dog was really tense and growling with his hackles raised, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if my dog was going to attack the man, so I just kind of froze. After a while the man backed away, jumped back over the fence and ran away down the alley. I put my dog back on his lead and went home, but he was still tense the whole way back. I was a little freaked out, but perhaps not as afraid as I should have been. Looking back on it now, I didn't know what that man wanted, or what he was doing there, or what would have happened if my dog wasn't there with me. There would have been no reason for him to go into that park by himself and come towards me like that. I shudder to think about it. I think if the man had made a move towards me, my dog would have attacked him. Well, I hope the bee was real. In Toronto there is a subway system run by the TTC or Toronto Transit Commission. They often square off certain parts of the subway route, which is pretty freaking basic, in order to do some upgrades or fix bits. Lately they've been shutting down the subway rides into downtown on the weekends. Anyway, they were doing some upgrades on the track and we were going by pretty slow, making sure not to run over anyone while they scampered out of the way. Out of nowhere the power cut out. Now, I should say that I wasn't the only one in the train car. The cars are decently long and I was at one end, and some woman was at the other end. When I walked onto the train it was up at her end where there was a giant bubble of seats empty around her. She was displaying the typical signs of batshit crazy and people sort of avoided her. Everyone else was off, getting off at Yonge, but I still had another couple stops east to go. She was laughing, audibly, and I tried to tune it out by listening to some music, but it never really worked. It was so chilling that my brain sort of just kept ignoring the music and focusing on her. So eventually I just unplugged the music and sat back, trying not to crap my pants. So anyway, the power cuts out and here I am sitting at one end, as far away from her as I could possibly be, and the lights turned off for some reason. She stopped laughing. In fact, she stopped making any noise at all. When the lights came back on about 5 seconds later, when I had sufficiently crapped my pants, she wasn't at the far end. She was about 3 seats away from me, staring at me. The second the train stopped I bolted for the freaking door. After she relocated she didn't make another sound, she just kept staring. Freaking creepiest moment of my goddamn life. My sister's bedroom was on the 2nd floor. All of a sudden she screamed and said she saw a hand on her window. We thought she was having a nightmare, told her to go back to bed. Next morning we found a ladder up against our house by her window. I once lived in a sort of bad neighborhood in a very tiny house with my brother, who was rarely there. Old house, so it was a little creepy and also felt like anyone who wanted to could have broken in. One night I was getting ready for bed. It was pretty late and during a hot summer. We didn't have AC, so I had one of those 2-fan window deals. The blinds were pulled down to the top of the fan. I was changing for bed. I sleep in underwear and a t-shirt. I slipped out of my pants and changed my shirt. I don't wear a bra to bed because frick that. I am about to hop into bed when I hear a low, masculine voice say, "Let's see those titties again." I think my whole body stopped working for 5 seconds while I absorbed the fact that there was a creepy Peeping Tom right outside my window and I was alone in a house that he could get into if he wanted. It was the first and only time I called the 911. I had a panic attack waiting for the police and the very nice 911 lady had to calm me down. A bright note, apparently it was a slow night because they sent 3 cars. I was so happy when I moved. I work in a Middle Eastern grocery store in one of the reddest states. When my son was an infant I would take him with me to work most days. We get a lot of soldiers that have spent time overseas looking for some of the good food they had there. One day this soldier comes in and he's just nice as can be. Then he sees my son and he starts talking to him in a cutie baby voice saying how cute he is. Then out of nowhere, and in the same cutie voice, he says to my son, "Oh, you're so cute. I just wanna gouge your little eyes out." It caught me way off guard. I just laughed nervously and picked my son up and walked in the back. When I was a youngling, my brother and I went for a walk in the woods behind our new house. We came upon an unfamiliar area and noticed plaster body parts thrown willy-nilly. We kept walking and discovered a mannequin massacre. Dozens of lifelike plaster mannequins in various positions of death and torture. Some with burn marks, some tied to trees with forks and knives stuck into them, and others hung by their necks from branches 3 stories up. The mannequins were dressed in human clothes and featured detailed facial expressions of pain and terror. In the middle of this WTF clusterfuck were childlike mannequins that had been tied up and blindfolded. Used condoms were everywhere. We left, terrified and wondering who the frick would do this. The time my high school sweetheart's father found out I took his daughter's virginity, he took me for a drive to an empty field to have a chat. He's a good father and she is an only child. I thought I was dead. My older brother and I were playing in a cemetery in a small Texas town. The cemetery sat next to some railroad tracks which led into the black section of town. For those not in the know, tons of small southern towns are still de facto segregated. It's a huge cemetery and there was no one around. Then we heard little pops, pop, 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 and pieces of the headstones began flying off around us. We looked toward the railroad tracks and there was an old black man shooting at us with a rifle. Not quite an encounter, but this is a scary story nonetheless, I think. I first got AIM when I was about 13. I wasn't very smart about using it, so I was always talking to these random people that I didn't know. One day, some guy who claimed to be from my school and just a couple years older than me met me and we started talking. Being 13 and naive, I talked to him for days and developed a crush on him. He asked me if I wanted to meet up to hang out and we even planned a specific time and place to do so. But I was a little skeptical. I made the smart choice to ask my older sister, who was his age, if she knew this guy. She didn't, which was a red flag to me. Since the school is small and it's impossible to not know someone there, I decided not to meet the guy and blocked him on AIM because I was creeped out that he obviously had been lying to me. The scariest part, about 3 years later, I saw a news article with that guy's name. He didn't lie about that, or the fact that he was from my town, but he was really 25. Why was he in the news? He was convicted of raping 3 young girls who he'd lured from AIM. He planned to murder one of them, but she managed to get away. During my first year of college, my brother, 8 years older, lived about 2 blocks up the street from where my dorm was. This made it super easy to go over and hang out since we've always been close. Well, this particular night, a Thursday I think, I decide to head home a little early and leave his place at about 11. I step outside onto the street and it is oddly empty. I can only see one other person in sight and he's directly across the street. He was making all sorts of weird guttural noises and wigging out, but this being in the city I see that all the time. So I just head left and think about putting in my headphones to listen to some music. God dang glad I didn't, because the noise from the guy suddenly stops after I walked about 10 feet. The abrupt silence was unnerving and I looked back over at him. He had stopped moving and was staring directly at me. Then he made a freaking beeline across the street. Wide quad lane. No cars though. For me, I picked up my pace and looked back once I reached the end of the block. He was about 70 feet away now and hobble running like some kind of zombie. So I freak out and start running back to the dorms with him in hot pursuit. And now he's making these slurping noises with his tongue and groaning. As I near the door to the dorm, I hope to God that my security card works on the first swipe. It never did. I jumped the short 4 stairs and zipped my card as the guy is now about 25-30 feet away and still running. Card reader flashes green and I grab the door, rush inside, and slam it back closed behind me. A group of students are just about to go out the door, but I stop them and tell them to wait. The guy comes all the way up to the door and paces for a little bit outside before slinking back off into the darkness. The thing about him that scared me the most was whenever I looked back or when he was at the door, he had constant eye contact. I never want to see that hungry look in someone's eyes again. Maybe he just wanted my gum. When I was younger and we had just moved to this town, the lady who lived down the block attempted to break into our house. She banged on the windows and couldn't get in though. Fast forward 6 years, there she is outside of our new house on the other side of town, asking us for gas money with our gas can. Several years ago I had to spend the night in a psych ward. I couldn't sleep because of this woman that was banging her head against the wall while screaming. Thinking back about this, it still seems like something out of a horror movie and still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So me and a girl drive her VW jetted out to a nature center at about 11 PM. The gate was never closed after business hours, so we stop the car in a parking lot overlooking a marsh, a boardwalk which runs through it, and heavy bush. Fleetwood Mac is playing over the stereo and we are just shooting the crap. 10-15 minutes after we park the car, I swear I see a flickering light far off in the bush, but we both shrug it off as we are in the middle of nowhere, and who the heck is going to be roaming around the woods of a closed down nature center? As you would imagine, it's pretty dang dark in a marsh at nighttime. Once your eyes adjust, you can make out silhouettes and see things directly in front of you, but that's it. Fast forward to 15 minutes later and we are making out. I'm in the driver's seat, and she is in shotgun. Both our seats are sort of reclined back and I am leaning over, half on top of her. After a few minutes of making out, I'll lean up to say something to her, and notice a big dark object pressed up against the passenger side window. At first it doesn't register, and then like a creepy freaking ton of bricks it hits me and I realize that there is a man with his face pressed up against the window watching us. I shoot back like a bolt, still staring at the window and the man who has not yet moved. The girl looks at me and then traces me line of sight to the window and lets out a scream. With this, the guy takes off and runs. I turned the car on and put that nature center in my rearview mirror as fast as I could. The Wicked Witch of the West is coming to steal all of your Halloween candy. Like this video in 2.1 seconds or she'll take all of it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.